The sound of gunshots echoed through the dusty streets of Redemption Creek as Felicity Morgan clutched her tattered shawl around her shoulders, her heart pounding in her chest. At 22, she had already been sold twice like cattle, and now the men who claimed to own her were planning to auction her off to the highest bidder at the saloon tonight. The year was 1876, and in this lawless corner of the Arizona Territory, a woman without protection might as well be property. Wyatt Daniels watched from the shadowed porch of the general store, his weathered hand resting on the handle of his Colt revolver. At 30, his face already bore the lines of a hard life lived under the unforgiving western sun. His eyes narrowed as he observed the way the two men flanking Felicity gripped her arms, practically dragging her toward the Golden Nugget Saloon. "You'll fetch a fine price tonight," one of them sneered, his breath reeking of cheap whiskey. Third time's a charm. Wyatt had heard enough. He'd been drifting through these parts for nearly a month, taking odd jobs and keeping to himself. But some things a man couldn't ignore, not if he wanted to live with himself come morning. "Evening, gentlemen," Wyatt called, stepping into the street, dust swirling around his worn boots. "Seems to me the lady isn't too keen on your company." The taller of the two men turned, revealing a face marred by a jagged scar running from temple to jaw. "Mind your business, cowboy." This one spoken for. Felicity's eyes, the color of summer sage, met Wyatt's. They held no hope, just a resigned weariness that stirred something deep in his chest. "I'm making it my business," Wyatt replied, his voice deceptively calm as he stepped closer. "The lady's going free today." The shorter man laughed, a harsh sound like stones rattling in a tin can. "You know what we paid for this one? $500 to that fancy house in Santa Fe, after the mining camp sold her to them for $300. We aim to make our money back, and then some." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "That's so? Well, seems to me a person ain't property to be bought and sold." "Law says different round these parts," Scarface countered, hand drifting toward his gun. "Then the law's wrong," Wyatt said simply. In one fluid motion, he drew his revolver and leveled it at the men. "Now, I'm not looking for trouble, but I'll tell you this once. They tried to sell her twice. Not a third time while I'm alive." People on the street scattered, ducking into doorways and behind water troughs. Felicity stood frozen between her captors, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. "You willing to die for some woman you don't even know?" The shorter man asked, his hand still hovering near his gun. Wyatt didn't blink. "Are you willing to die to keep her captive?" A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant piano music drifting from the saloon. Then, with a muttered curse, Scarface shoved Felicity forward, sending her stumbling toward Wyatt. "She ain't worth dying over," he spat. "Come on, Ernest. There's easier money to be made." Wyatt kept his gun trained on the men until they retreated down the street, disappearing around a corner. Only then did he holster his weapon and turn his attention to the woman trembling before him. "You all right, miss?" he asked, keeping his distance, not wanting to frighten her further. Felicity stared at him, wariness and confusion mingling in her gaze. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." Wyatt pushed his hat back slightly on his head. "Don't need to know you to know what's right. Name's Wyatt Daniels. I'd offer to shake your hand, but I reckon you've had enough of men grabbing at you for one day." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Felicity Morgan," she offered. Then, looking over her shoulder nervously, "They'll be back, you know. With friends." "I expect so," Wyatt agreed. "Which is why we should put some distance between us and this town. Do you have somewhere safe to go?" "Family." Felicity shook her head, loose strands of honey-brown hair falling from her haphazard bun. "No family. Not anymore. Those men, they found me working as a laundress in Santa Fe. Said they had a better job for me. I was foolish enough to believe them." Wyatt's expression darkened. "That's not foolishness, Miss Morgan. That's them being predators." He glanced down the street, already formulating a plan. "I've got a camp set up just outside town. Horses stabled at the livery. If you're willing to trust me that far, we can head out before those fellas round up reinforcements." Felicity hesitated, studying his face as if searching for deceit. "How do I know you're not just like them? Taking me somewhere worse?" It was a fair question, one Wyatt respected her enough to ask. "You don't," he admitted. "All I can give you is my word that I'll see you to safety, wherever that might be, and then go my own way if that's what you want." For a long moment, she considered his offer, weighing the risk of trusting this stranger against the certainty of what awaited her if she remained. Finally, she nodded. "I don't have much choice, do I, Mr. Daniels?" "There's always a choice," Wyatt said gently. "And please, call me Wyatt." 20 minutes later, they were riding out of town, Felicity seated behind Wyatt on his sturdy chestnut gelding. They traveled in silence as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert landscape in hues of gold and crimson. The only sounds were the steady rhythm of the horse's hooves and the occasional cry of a distant hawk. Wyatt guided them off the main trail and into the foothills, following a winding path that would be difficult to track. As the shadows lengthened, they came upon his simple camp, a small tent, a stone-ringed fire pit, and his meager belongings neatly arranged. "It's not much," he said as he helped her down from the horse, careful not to grip her arm the way her captors had. "But it's safe for tonight." Felicity looked around, taking in the secluded spot with its view of the valley below. "It's perfect," she murmured, then added more strongly, "Thank you, Wyatt. I know you've put yourself in danger for me." "Been in danger before," he replied with a shrug, unsaddling his horse. "Won't be the last time." As Wyatt built a small, nearly smokeless fire, Felicity watched him, trying to understand this man who had risked everything for a stranger. His movements were efficient, practiced, those of a man accustomed to life on the move. The fading light caught the silver threads in his dark hair at the temples and illuminated a thin scar above his left eyebrow. "You're not just a cowboy, are you?" she asked suddenly. Wyatt looked up, a hint of surprise in his blue eyes. "What makes you say that?" "The way you handled those men. The way you move. You've seen your share of fights." He settled back, considering his words. "Did some scouting for the Union during the war. Rode with the Texas Rangers for a spell after. These days, I just drift where the wind takes me." He paused, adding quietly, "Lost my taste for violence, though sometimes it finds me anyway." Felicity hugged her knees to her chest. "How did you come to be in Redemption Creek?" "Heard they needed hands at the Henderson Ranch north of here. Work dried up before I arrived." He stoked the fire. "Your turn, Miss Morgan. How did a lady like yourself end up in such a predicament?" The bitterness in her laugh surprised them both. "A lady like myself? Mr. Daniels, I was born in a mining camp to a mother who died before I could remember her face. My father was killed in a cave-in when I was 12. Since then, I've been surviving however I could." She paused, her voice growing softer. "I was working as a laundress, like I said. Honest work. Then those men came with their promises of a position as a housekeeper for a wealthy family. And instead, they sold you to that house in Santa Fe." Wyatt finished for her, his expression grim. Felicity nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "I escaped after 3 days. Ran until I couldn't run anymore. A farmer and his wife found me collapsed on the road. They took me in, gave me work. I thought I was safe." Her voice caught. "Until those men showed up again last week. Said I was stolen property." Wyatt's hands clenched involuntarily. "You're not property, Felicity. You never were." The use of her first name brought her eyes back to his. "In this world, a woman alone might as well be," she said softly. "Unless she has protection." "You have it now," Wyatt assured her. "For as long as you need it." That night, Wyatt insisted Felicity take the tent while he slept under the stars, his rifle within arm's reach. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her as she lay listening to the nocturnal sounds of the desert and considering her options. By morning, she had made a decision. "I need to go to Willow Springs," she announced as Wyatt handed her a tin cup of strong coffee. "I have a friend there, the only person I trust. She can help me." Wyatt nodded. "Willow Springs is about 3 days' ride from here. Rough country between, but we can make it." He didn't question her decision or suggest she find a closer haven. They broke camp efficiently, leaving little trace of their presence. As they rode, Felicity gradually shared more of her story. She'd been born in 1854 in a silver mining settlement that had long since been abandoned. After her father's death, she'd survived by taking in laundry, mending clothes, and occasionally working as a cook's helper in various towns across the territory. "Never stayed in one place too long," she explained. "Something always happened to make moving on seem like the wisest choice." "Like what?" Wyatt asked, guiding his horse around a rocky outcropping. Felicity was silent for so long he thought she might not answer. Men, she finally said. Men who didn't understand that no means no, regardless of a woman's station in life. Wyatt's shoulders stiffened, but he kept his voice even. I'm sorry that happened to you. I learned to be careful, she continued, to make myself invisible. It worked until it didn't. They made camp that night in a sheltered canyon, beside a small spring that provided fresh water. After a simple meal of jerky and beans, they sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged overhead in a dazzling display. Tell me about your friend in Willow Springs, Wyatt said, breaking the quiet. Felicity's face softened. Ruth Baker. We met in an orphanage when we were 14. She escaped first, then came back for me. We looked out for each other for years until she met her husband, Thomas. He's a good man, runs the general store in Willow Springs. She traced patterns in the dirt with a stick. They offered to let me stay with them, but I didn't want to impose. Thought I could make my own way. And now I know better, she admitted. There's no shame in accepting help from those who care about you. It took me too long to learn that lesson. Wyatt studied her in the firelight. Despite everything she'd endured, there was a quiet strength about her that commanded respect. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones worth learning, he said. The next day brought them into Apache territory. Wyatt was vigilant, reading signs that Felicity couldn't see. Disturbed rocks, bent grasses, distant dust clouds that might be riders. Are we in danger? She asked, noticing how his hand rested more frequently on his gun. Just being cautious, he replied. The Apache have good reason not to trust white folk passing through their land. Can't say I blame them. Around midday, they stopped to rest in the shade of a rock formation. As Wyatt checked the horizon with a small spyglass, Felicity gathered her courage to ask the question that had been on her mind. Why are you really helping me, Wyatt? And please don't say it's just because it's the right thing to do. Plenty of men know what's right, but choose differently. Wyatt lowered the spyglass, his expression contemplative. When I was 16, my sister ran away from home to escape our father's heavy hand. She was only 14. His voice grew rough with emotion. 2 years later, I found her in a place much like the one those men were taking you to in Santa Fe. By then, she was broken in ways I couldn't fix. What happened to her? Felicity asked softly. She died that winter. Consumption, they said, but I think it was more a matter of her spirit giving up. He met Felicity's gaze directly. I couldn't help her then, but maybe I can help you now. Felicity reached out, hesitantly placing her hand on his arm. I'm sorry about your sister, and I'm grateful for your help, more than I can say. The moment stretched between them, a fragile connection neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Then Wyatt cleared his throat and stood, breaking the spell. We should keep moving. Want to make it to the old trading post by nightfall. They continued their journey, the landscape gradually changing as they traveled. Scrubby desert gave way to scattered junipers and pines as they climbed in elevation. By late afternoon, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, and the air had taken on the charged quality that preceded a downpour. Going to be a bad one, Wyatt observed, gauging the darkening sky. We need to find better shelter than the trading post. There's a cave system about a half-mile east of here, if I'm remembering right. They veered off their planned route, racing against the approaching storm. The first fat raindrops were just beginning to fall when they reached the cave entrance, a narrow opening in the side of a limestone bluff. Stay here with the horse, Wyatt instructed, drawing his revolver. Let me make sure we don't have company. He disappeared into the darkness, returning minutes later with a nod. It's clear. There's a larger chamber inside, dry and defensible. They led the horse in just as the skies opened, sending sheets of rain cascading down the bluff face. The cave was surprisingly spacious, with a high ceiling and enough room for both them and the animal. Old fire rings indicated they weren't the first to seek shelter here. Looks like others had the same idea, Felicity remarked, examining the remnants of previous occupants, a discarded tin cup, a frayed piece of rope, a stack of long-dried firewood. Probably trappers or prospectors, Wyatt agreed, working to get a small fire started with the available wood. This route used to be busier before the new rail line went in further south. As night fell, the storm intensified, thunder echoing through the cave entrance like distant cannon fire. The temperature dropped, and Felicity found herself moving closer to the fire, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Here," Wyatt said, shrugging out of his coat and offering it to her. "This will help." "But you'll be cold," she protested. "I've weathered worse," he assured her with a small smile. "Besides, I've got the fire to tend." Gratefully, she accepted the coat, enveloping herself in its warmth and the faint scent of leather, tobacco, and something uniquely Wyatt. As he added more wood to the fire, the flickering light illuminated his profile, and Felicity found herself studying him, the straight line of his nose, the set of his jaw, the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "You're staring, Miss Morgan," he said without turning around, a hint of amusement in his voice. Felicity felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. "I was just thinking how strange life is. 3 days ago, I thought my fate was sealed. Now I'm here, heading toward a new start, all because you happened to be passing by at the right moment." Wyatt settled back, stretching his long legs toward the fire. "Maybe it wasn't chance. My mother used to say God puts people in our path for a reason." "Do you believe that?" she asked. He considered the question, watching the flames dance. "I believe we make our own choices, but sometimes the timing of things. It makes you wonder." He glanced at her. "What about you? Are you a believer, Felicity?" The use of her first name again sent a small thrill through her. "I was raised to be. My father read the Bible every night, even by candlelight when we couldn't afford lamp oil." She paused, remembering. "I've questioned a lot since then, but I still find comfort in the idea that there's a greater purpose to all this. That suffering might have meaning. That's more faith than most can muster after what you've been through," Wyatt observed. "Faith is all I had sometimes," she said simply. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the cave, a different kind of energy was building, an awareness that neither was quite ready to acknowledge. They talked late into the night, sharing stories from their lives. Wyatt's time as a ranger, Felicity's brief stint as a schoolteacher in a mining town, their favorite books, their dreams for the future. "I'd like a place of my own someday," Felicity confessed. "Nothing grand, just a small house with a garden. Somewhere I could put down roots." "Sounds nice," Wyatt said, a wistfulness in his tone that caught her attention. "What about you? What does Wyatt Daniels dream of when he's riding those lonely trails?" He stared into the fire for so long she thought he might not answer. "Peace, I suppose," he finally said. "Been chasing or running from something most of my life. Would be nice to just be still for a while." The vulnerability in his admission touched something deep inside Felicity. Without thinking, she reached out, covering his rough hand with her smaller one. "Thank you for sharing that with me." Their eyes met over the flames, and for a moment, it seemed the world outside ceased to exist. Then Wyatt gently withdrew his hand, clearing his throat. "We should get some rest. Morning will come quick, and we've got ground to cover tomorrow." Felicity nodded, recognizing the boundary he was setting. As they prepared for sleep on opposite sides of the fire, she wondered what might have happened if he hadn't pulled away and why the thought made her heart race. The storm passed during the night, leaving behind a landscape washed clean and glittering in the morning sun. They set out early, both a little quieter than before, each processing the shift in their relationship that had occurred in the intimacy of the cave. By midday, they had made good progress, the terrain gradually becoming more forested as they approached the mountains that separated them from Willow Springs. Wyatt remained alert, frequently scanning their back trail. "You think they're following us?" Felicity asked, noticing his vigilance. "Can't be sure," he replied. "But men like that don't give up easily when money's involved. And you, Felicity Morgan, were going to be worth a lot of money to them." The reminder of her recent captivity sent a shiver down her spine. "If they find us." "They won't," Wyatt assured her firmly. "And if they do, they'll regret it." They stopped to water the horse at a small stream, taking the opportunity to refill their canteens and stretch their legs. As Felicity washed her face in the cool water, she caught Wyatt watching her, an unreadable expression in his eyes. When she straightened, water droplets glistening on her skin, he quickly looked away. "We should reach the mountain pass by evening," he said, focusing on adjusting the horse's saddle. "There's a line shack about halfway up where we can spend the night. From there, it's just a half-day's ride to Willow Springs." Felicity felt a curious mix of relief and disappointment. Relief that she would soon be safe with Ruth and Thomas. Disappointment that her time with Wyatt was coming to an end. Over the past 3 days, he had shown her more kindness and respect than most men she'd encountered in her entire life. "What will you do after you've delivered me safely?" she asked, trying to keep her tone casual. Wyatt shrugged. "Haven't thought that far ahead. Maybe look for work at one of the ranches around Willow Springs. Or head north to Colorado. Heard they need men for a new mining operation up there. You could stay," Felicity suggested before she could stop herself. "In Willow Springs, I mean. It's a growing town. They could use a man of your abilities." He regarded her with a hint of surprise, then a slow smile spread across his face. "Might consider it, if I had a good enough reason to put down roots." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Felicity felt her cheeks warm, but she held his gaze. "I hope you find one." The moment was interrupted by the distant sound of a gunshot. Both of them froze, instinctively crouching lower. "Could be a hunter," Wyatt said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. "Stay here. Keep low." Before Felicity could protest, he had moved away, sliding through the underbrush with a stealth that spoke to his years as a scout. She pressed herself against the trunk of a large pine, heart hammering in her chest, straining to hear over the gurgle of the stream. Minutes stretched like hours. Then Wyatt was back, his expression grim. "Riders. 4 of them. Following our trail." Fear clutched at Felicity's throat. "Is it them? Can't be certain from this distance, but it seems likely." Wyatt was already leading the horse away from the stream, keeping to the rocky ground where they would leave fewer tracks. "We need to move fast, try to lose them in the mountains." They mounted quickly, Wyatt pushing the horse to a faster pace than they'd maintained before. The animal responded admirably, seeming to sense the urgency of their flight. They followed game trails and dry creek beds, doubling back occasionally to confuse their pursuers. By late afternoon, they had reached the foothills of the mountains. The terrain became steeper, the forest thicker. Wyatt chose their path carefully, always with an eye toward concealment and defensive positions should they be overtaken. "Are we still heading for the line shack?" Felicity asked as they paused to rest the horse. Wyatt shook his head. "Too risky. If they know these mountains, they might check there. We'll find a place to hole up for the night, somewhere less obvious." The sun was setting when they came upon a small plateau sheltered by a rocky overhang. A natural spring bubbled from the mountainside, providing water, and the thick stand of pines would help conceal any small fire they might risk. "This will do," Wyatt decided, helping Felicity dismount. "We'll set up camp here, but no fire until full dark, and a small one at that." As they worked together to prepare their meager camp, Felicity couldn't help noticing the tension in Wyatt's shoulders, the way his hand never strayed far from his gun. Once, he paused in his work, head tilted as if listening for pursuit. "Do you think we lost them?" she asked quietly. "For now," he replied. "But they know where we're headed. Willow Springs is the nearest town in this direction." The implication was clear. Even if they reached Ruth and Thomas safely, the danger wouldn't be over. "I've brought trouble to your door," Felicity said, distress evident in her voice. "And now I'll bring it to my friends as well." Wyatt moved to her side, his expression softening as he looked down at her. "This trouble isn't of your making, Felicity. It's those men who should bear the weight of it, not you. But if anything happens to you because of me, it won't," he interrupted firmly. "I've faced worse odds and come through." Despite his confidence, worry gnawed at Felicity. Why are they so determined? Surely there are easier targets. The words tasted bitter in her mouth, but they needed to be said. Wyatt's jaw tightened. "It's not just about the money now. It's about pride. Men like that can't stand being shown up, especially not by a woman who escaped them and a drifter who interfered." Night fell completely, the darkness so profound that Felicity could barely see her hand before her face. Only then did Wyatt risk a tiny fire, carefully built to produce minimal smoke. They ate a cold supper, speaking little, both lost in their own thoughts. As they prepared to sleep, Wyatt handed Felicity his spare revolver. "Ever used one of these?" She took it gingerly, feeling its weight. "No. My father had a rifle, but I never learned to shoot it." "It's simple enough," he said, showing her how to cock the hammer and where the trigger was. "Point and squeeze. Try not to close your eyes when you fire. It's got a kick, so be ready for that. You think I'll need it, she said. It wasn't a question. I think it's better to be prepared, he answered. Keep it close tonight. Despite the danger lurking in the darkness beyond their camp, Felicity found herself drifting off, lulled by exhaustion and the reassuring presence of Wyatt nearby. She dreamed of a small house with a garden, a place of her own. But in the dream, she wasn't alone. Wyatt was there, reading by lamplight while she tended to a pot of stew on the stove. It was a vision of domestic tranquility so vivid that when she jerked awake before dawn, the loss of it left an ache in her chest. The soft sound that had awakened her came again, a horse nickering somewhere below their position. Wyatt was already alert, a finger to his lips signaling for silence. He moved to the edge of the plateau, peering down into the pre-dawn gloom. When he returned to her side, his expression was grim. They found our trail. 2 riders about half a mile back, moving slow, looking for signs. What do we do? Felicity whispered, clutching the revolver he'd given her. We move out now, while we still have the advantage of higher ground and darkness. They packed quickly and silently, every movement deliberate. The horse, sensing their tension, remained quiet as Wyatt led it away from the spring, choosing a different path than the one they'd ascended by. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten as they picked their way down a steep, narrow trail that wound through dense forest. The going was slow, treacherous in the dim light, but Wyatt seemed to know exactly where to place each foot. How do you know these mountains so well? Felicity asked in a hushed voice. Spent a winter up here, trapping, he replied, equally quiet. After the war, before I joined the Rangers. Good place to be alone with your thoughts. They had been traveling for perhaps an hour when the sound of a branch breaking somewhere behind them froze them in place. Wyatt motioned for Felicity to stay put, then disappeared into the trees with a stealth that left her marveling. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching her nerves tighter. Then a gunshot shattered the morning silence, followed by a shout and another shot. Felicity clutched the horse's reins, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. A figure emerged from the trees, and she nearly sobbed with relief when she recognized Wyatt's broad shoulders. But her relief turned to alarm when she saw the blood staining his left sleeve. You're hurt, she gasped, moving toward him. It's nothing, he insisted, though his face was pale. Bullet grazed me. But we need to move, now. That was one of them, but there's at least one more, maybe more. Did you? She couldn't finish the question. He won't be following us anymore, Wyatt confirmed grimly. But he got off a shot that might bring his friends running. Come on. They mounted the horse together, Wyatt taking the reins despite his injury. He urged the animal forward at the fastest pace the terrain would allow, following a route that zigzagged down the mountainside. By mid-morning, they had reached the valley on the other side of the mountain pass. Willow Springs lay just a few hours' ride ahead, a prospect that should have filled Felicity with relief. Instead, she was consumed with worry for Wyatt, whose sleeve was now soaked with blood, and fear that their pursuers might still be on their trail. We need to stop and tend to your arm, she insisted as they paused by a small creek. Wyatt reluctantly agreed, dismounting with a wince he couldn't quite hide. Felicity helped him remove his coat and roll up his sleeve, revealing an ugly furrow where the bullet had carved a path through the flesh of his upper arm. It needs cleaning, she said, tearing a strip from her petticoat to use as a bandage. This will hurt. Wyatt didn't flinch as she washed the wound with water from the creek, though she saw the muscles in his jaw clench. As she worked, a strange intimacy developed between them, her hands on his skin, his trust in her care. You're good at this, he observed, watching her neatly bind the wound. Necessity, she replied. In a mining camp, injuries are common, and doctors are rare. When she finished, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, acknowledgement of the bond that had formed over their days together, a connection deeper than mere gratitude or duty. Felicity, Wyatt began, his voice rough with emotion. When this is over, the crack of a rifle interrupted him, the bullet splintering the tree trunk inches from Felicity's head. Wyatt reacted instantly, shoving her down and drawing his revolver in one fluid motion. Stay low, he ordered, returning fire toward the ridge where the shot had originated. 2 riders appeared at the tree line, one with a rifle, the other wielding a revolver. With a shock of recognition, Felicity realized it was Scarface and his companion from Redemption Creek. "Nowhere to run now, girlie," Scarface shouted. "Your protector's bleeding, and we've got you outgunned." Wyatt pushed Felicity behind a fallen log, his expression deadly serious. "When I give the word, I want you to run for the horse. Ride hard for Willow Springs. Don't look back." "I'm not leaving you," she protested, clutching his arm. "Not when you're hurt." "This isn't a discussion," he said firmly. "I'll cover you, then follow. But you need to get to safety." Before she could argue further, he rose slightly and fired 3 rapid shots, forcing their attackers to take cover. "Now, Felicity, go." Heart in her throat, she ran, keeping low, zigzagging toward where their horse waited nervously. Behind her, the exchange of gunfire continued, Wyatt's measured shots against the wilder firing of the pursuers. She reached the horse and swung into the saddle, turning to look for Wyatt. He was moving toward her, firing as he went, when Scarface emerged from behind a boulder and leveled his rifle. "Wyatt, behind you!" Felicity screamed, fumbling for the revolver he had given her. Wyatt spun, but not before Scarface fired. The impact drove Wyatt to one knee, but he managed to raise his gun and return fire. Scarface dropped, clutching his chest. The second man, seeing his companion fall, turned and fled back toward the trees. Felicity urged the horse forward, reaching Wyatt just as he struggled to his feet, one hand pressed to his side where a dark stain was spreading. "I told you to ride," he gasped, leaning heavily against her as she helped him mount behind her. "And I told you I wouldn't leave you," she replied, turning the horse toward Willow Springs. "Hold on to me. We're going to make it." The ride to town was a blur of fear and determination. Wyatt's arms around her waist grew progressively weaker, his breathing labored against her back. Felicity pushed the tired horse as hard as she dared, praying they would reach help in time. Willow Springs appeared on the horizon like a mirage, a cluster of buildings nestled in a green valley. As they approached, Felicity scanned the main street frantically, finally spotting the sign for Baker's General Store near the center of town. People stared as she rode in. A bleeding man slumped against her back, but Felicity had no attention to spare for their curious gazes. She reined in directly in front of the store, nearly falling as she dismounted and tried to support Wyatt's weight. "Help!" she called, her voice breaking. "Please, someone help us." The store door burst open, and a woman with auburn hair rushed out, her eyes widening in recognition. "Felicity? My God, what happened?" "Ruth," Felicity sobbed with relief. "He's been shot. He saved me. Please help him." More people were gathering now, including a tall man with kind eyes who immediately moved to Wyatt's side, supporting him as he slid from the horse. "Thomas," Ruth addressed her husband, "get him inside. I'll fetch Dr. Miller." What followed was a chaotic blur, Wyatt being carried into the store and laid on a cot in the back room, Ruth running for the doctor, Thomas cutting away Wyatt's bloodied shirt to reveal the gunshot wound in his side. "The bullet's still in there," Thomas said grimly. "But it doesn't look like it hit anything vital. He's lucky." Felicity clutched Wyatt's hand, alarmed by how cold and clammy it felt. His eyes fluttered open, focusing on her with effort. "Are you safe?" he whispered. "Yes," she assured him, tears streaming down her face. "Thanks to you. We're in Willow Springs, at Ruth and Thomas's store. The doctor is coming." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Told you I'd get you here. Rest now," she urged, squeezing his hand. "Just hold on." Dr. Miller arrived minutes later, a gruff older man with steady hands and a reassuring manner. He examined Wyatt quickly, then turned to Thomas. "I need hot water, clean cloths, my instruments from my bag, and whiskey for him and for me." As the doctor worked to extract the bullet and clean the wound, Felicity waited anxiously in the store with Ruth, who demanded to know everything that had happened. Through tears and whispered fears, Felicity recounted the events of the past days, her captivity, Wyatt's intervention, their journey, and the final confrontation. "Those animals," Ruth muttered, her face flushed with anger. "To think they could just buy and sell a woman like cattle." "It happens more than people want to admit," Felicity said tiredly. "Especially to women without protection or means." Ruth squeezed her hand. "Well, you're safe now. You can stay with us as long as you need." "What about Wyatt?" Felicity asked, glancing toward the back room where Dr. Miller was still working. A knowing look crossed Ruth's face. He's important to you. It wasn't a question, but Felicity answered anyway. He risked everything for me, Ruth. A stranger? Who does that? A good man, Ruth replied simply. And those are rare enough that when you find one, you'd be wise to hold on tight. Hours later, Dr. Miller emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth. He'll live, he announced without preamble. The bullet missed his vital organs. He's lost blood, and there's risk of fever, but with proper care, he should recover fully. Relief washed over Felicity in a dizzying wave. Can I see him? The doctor nodded. He's asking for you. But keep it brief, he needs rest more than anything now. Wyatt was pale against the white sheets, his torso wrapped in clean bandages. But his eyes were clear when they met hers, and he managed a small smile as she approached. You look terrible, she told him, trying for levity despite the tears threatening again. You should see the other fellow, he replied weakly. Is he dead? Felicity confirmed. And the other one ran off. I don't think he'll be back. Wyatt nodded, wincing slightly at the movement. Good. She sat beside him, taking his hand between both of hers. The doctor says you'll recover. Ruth and Thomas have offered to let us both stay with them while you heal. Us both, he repeated, something warm kindling in his eyes despite his pain. You're staying in Willow Springs then? For now, she said. Ruth says there's need for a schoolteacher here. The town's growing fast with the new Silver Strike up north. A schoolteacher, Wyatt mused. Suits you. Felicity smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes for the first time in days. And what about you, Wyatt Daniels? Will you stay too? Or will the trail call you once you're healed? He regarded her steadily, his hand tightening around hers. Depends. On what? She asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. On whether I have a good enough reason to put down roots, he said, echoing their earlier conversation. I think I might have found one. The weeks that followed were a time of healing for Wyatt's body and for Felicity's spirit. She took a room above Ruth and Thomas's store, helping in the shop while arrangements were made for her to begin teaching at the small schoolhouse at the edge of town. Wyatt recovered slowly but steadily, moving from the back room of the store to a small cabin Thomas owned behind the building. Each day, Felicity would bring him meals and sit with him, reading from books borrowed from Ruth's small library or simply talking as the sun set over the mountains. They learned each other's stories in those quiet hours, the painful parts they'd skimmed over during their journey, and the joyful moments too. Wyatt told her of his time in the war, of the nightmares that still occasionally haunted him, of the sister he couldn't save. Felicity shared her dreams of a home and family, her love of teaching, her fear that she would always be running from something or someone. You don't have to run anymore, Wyatt told her one evening as they sat on the cabin's small porch, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. Not while I'm alive. The echo of his words from that first confrontation in Redemption Creek, not a third time, while I'm alive, sent a shiver through Felicity. Is that a promise, Mr. Daniels? He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. If you want it to be. By the time autumn painted the surrounding mountains in hues of gold and crimson, Wyatt had fully recovered and taken a job as deputy to Willow Springs' aging sheriff. His familiarity with the law and his steady presence quickly earned him the respect of the townspeople. Felicity, meanwhile, had settled into her role as the town's schoolteacher, finding joy in the eager faces of her students and the sense of purpose the position gave her. In the evenings, she would often walk with Wyatt along the creek that gave the town its name, their conversations ranging from the day's events to their hopes for the future. It was on one such evening, with the first snowflakes of the season beginning to fall, that Wyatt stopped beneath the great willow that dominated the town square. I've been thinking, he said, suddenly serious. A dangerous pastime. Felicity teased, though her heart quickened at his tone. I've never been one for fancy words or grand gestures, he continued, taking both her hands in his. But I know what I want now, Felicity. And it's you. A life with you. She stared up at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Wyatt, let me finish, he said gently. I came to this territory looking for something I couldn't name. Peace, maybe, or purpose. I found both with you. I love you, Felicity Morgan. Will you marry me? Tears sprang to her eyes, but they were tears of joy. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you, Wyatt Daniels. He pulled her close, his kiss a promise of all that was to come. When they finally broke apart, snowflakes clinging to their hair and eyelashes, Felicity couldn't help but laugh at the sheer improbability of their journey. "What's so funny?" Wyatt asked, smiling down at her. "Just thinking about how we met," she replied. "Who would have thought that being sold twice would lead me to the greatest happiness of my life?" His expression sobered. "You were never meant to be bought or sold, Felicity. You were always meant to be free to choose your own path, your own love. And I choose you," she said simply. "Now and always." They were married in the small church of Willow Springs just before Christmas, with Ruth as Felicity's matron of honor and Thomas standing as Wyatt's best man. The townspeople, who had embraced both the quiet deputy and the gentle schoolteacher, filled the pews to witness their union. Spring found them settling into a small house at the edge of town, built with the help of their friends and neighbors. It had a garden, just as Felicity had dreamed, and a porch where Wyatt would sit in the evenings, reading or simply watching the sunset. And if sometimes he still scanned the horizon with a vigilance born of hard experience, Felicity understood. The world could be a dangerous place, especially for those who had known its cruelties firsthand. But within the walls of their home, they had created a sanctuary of peace and love. One warm evening, as they sat on their porch swing watching fireflies rise from the meadow beyond their garden, Felicity rested her head on Wyatt's shoulder, her hand unconsciously moving to her belly where new life had just begun to grow. "What are you thinking about?" Wyatt asked, noticing her contemplative smile. "About how far we've come," she replied, "and about the journey ahead." His arm tightened around her shoulders. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Felicity nodded, content in the knowledge that the promise he had made in a dusty street in Redemption Creek, "Not a third time while I'm alive," had transformed into something far more profound. A lifetime commitment to love and protect each other, no matter what challenges arose. In the years that followed, they would welcome 2 children, a boy with his father's steady gaze and a girl with her mother's determination. Wyatt would eventually become sheriff of Willow Springs, while Felicity continued teaching until she opened a small lending library adjoining their home. Their life together wasn't without challenges. Twice more, shadows from Felicity's past appeared, men who thought they could claim her or profit from her. Both times, they found themselves facing not just Wyatt but an entire town that had come to love and respect the woman who taught their children and the man who kept them safe. And throughout it all, through joy and sorrow, prosperity and hardship, the bond that had formed during those desperate days of flight only strengthened, a testament to the truth that some connections, once forged, can withstand any trial. For Felicity Morgan Daniels, who had once believed that a woman alone in the world was at the mercy of forces beyond her control, the greatest revelation was this: sometimes salvation comes in unexpected forms, and freedom, true freedom, is found not in isolation, but in the embrace of a love strong enough to overcome every obstacle. As for Wyatt Daniels, the drifter who had finally found a place to call home, he never regretted the moment he stepped into that street in Redemption Creek and made a stand that changed 2 lives forever. Every morning, waking beside Felicity, he gave thanks for the twist of fate that had led him to her and for the courage they both had found to believe in second chances. In the end, it was not just a story of rescue but of redemption. 2 souls, battered by life's hardships, finding in each other the healing they both needed and the love they deserved. And in Willow Springs, long after both had passed into memory, the story would still be told of the cowboy who faced down danger and declared, "They tried to sell her twice. Not a third time while I'm alive," words that became not just a moment of defiance but the foundation of a lifetime of love.